must hurry. You cannot let the Lord of Dust catch up to you.
Welcome to Watch Mojo, and today we're counting down our picks for the top 20 most horrible, dreadful, miserable video games to have ever released this past decade. Number 20, Watch Dogs Legion.
Only took 12,000 years to build it up, and one night to tear it all down.
Oh my god.
In a sense, video games are repetitive in nature, but a good video game hides the repetition through fun gameplay loops that feed into each other. Watch Dogs Legion had something going for itself in how you could play as any character in the game, but that's where the fun ideas stop flowing. Everything after the tutorial is your run-of-the-mill, sneak into that place, silent takedown, grab reward, rinse and repeat. It doesn't help that what few interesting stories were introduced are cut short before they can tell something compelling while the difficulty fluctuates between every mission. Ultimately, you'll stop playing out of either boredom or frustration.
Right! Go for it, Dead Dead!
Number 19, Mighty Number 9.
Sacre bleu! What happened to the lights? I'm scared! Mommy!
Following a mass exodus of frustrated Capcom leads, one alumni of the publisher, Keiji Inafune, ventured out to bring a game to the starved Mega Man fanbase. At one point, Mighty Number 9 was shaping up to be a worthy successor from what little 2D art had been shown. Once we saw the game's new 3D visuals for the first time ever, everything went downhill at an almost neck-breaking speed. First came the infamous anime fan on prom night insult.
Stuff that'll make you faster and stronger and make the bad guys cry like an anime fan on prom night.
Then the livestream that told audiences the game was better than nothing.
It's better than nothing. At least that's my opinion.
And finally Release Day, which revealed just how mediocre and inspiring the entire game was. Inafune's reputation was stained, and we've yet to see him or developer Concept bounce back from this. Number 18, Grey Hill Incident.
Yeah, but don't go home by the street. Go through the barn in front of my caravan. I've got a camera. I'm gonna record the UFO.
In the world of video games, we've seen all kinds of creative depictions of aliens across a rainbow of games targeted at different audiences. Rarely do we ever see a frightening interpretation of the traditional Grey Moon Men in the same way Grey Hill Incident approached it. It's also rare that we see a creative idea tank miserably in terms of quality. Grey Hill Incident forced players to use stealthy tactics to progress, only for AI to be unfairly buggy, thus breaking the whole point of stealth in the first place. What's worse is that if you were caught by the aliens, there was no telling how far back the game would send you as checkpoints were unevenly dispersed. It all makes for a somewhat infuriating experience, and we're only a few entries into this list. Number 17, Super Seducer, How to Talk to Girls.
So you teach at the university? That's interesting.
Yeah.
And tell me, do you actually like what you do, or you do it just for money?
No, I really do like what I do.
It's important to look out for folks who will say and do anything to exploit you or take your hard-earned cash in exchange for a lazy product. Case in point, Super Seducer, How to Talk to Girls. In this game, self-proclaimed pickup artist Richard LaRuina tries to educate the player on how to approach women, get a date with them, and eventually sleep with them. Not only are the situations presented here unrealistic and hokey, they also portray women in a way that kinda makes them seem formulaic, one-note, and nothing more than objects for the sake of self-fulfillment. Of course, some folks didn't like these kind of criticisms levied against LaRuina and his game, so they bought the game out of spite and gave him enough money to spawn 2 more sequels.
This is a classic PUA, pickup artist routine from Baxter, and it works, you know, to an extent, but again, it's a routine.
Number 16, Ghostbusters. 2016 was already a rough year for the Ghostbusters IP. A solid video game could have helped remedy the backlash against the 2016 movie a little bit, but this title wound up being arguably worse than the film. In addition to the mundane gameplay of going room to room and fighting ghosts, Ghostbusters was abysmal in technical performance with its constant stuttering and drastic dips in frame rate. The game was such a financial failure that developer Fireforge Games closed its doors not too long after launch. As for the game itself, it was delisted from all storefronts in January 2019.
Ready to trap dance?
All right.
Nice!
Out of this world.
Number 15. Balan Wonderworld. Yuji Naka and Naoto Oshima will forever be remembered as a couple of Sega's most influential game designers in the company's history. However, Balan Wonderworld was not the kind of game anyone wanted from these two when they announced they had partnered with Square Enix for a new 3D platformer. Balan Wonderworld boasted a unique theme centered on musical theater, and that's pretty much the only nice thing we have to say about it. Everything else about the game is a befuddling mess. Why does every button do the same exact action? Why do objects de-render when you get closer to them? Why are we only allowed to have 3 costumes at once instead of a wheel, or focus the level on just one costume? Overall, why is the game so overly complicated and how basic it is? It's very unlikely that we'll ever get answers to these questions. Number 14. Generation Zero. Be very skeptical of whoever is screaming about how Generation Zero has improved since launch. At launch, Generation Zero was indeed an utter train wreck. Crashing, bugs in AI behavior and pathing, broken stealth mechanics, constantly recycled assets in places that made no sense, and worst of all, poor implementation of resources that could put a player in a position where it's impossible to bounce back into a stable position for survival. While some of these problems have since been remedied, there's no fixing a generic world design, there's no fixing recycled assets, and there's no fixing bland visuals, audio, and character design. Generation Zero is an absolute zero. Number 13. Warcraft 3 Reforged. Blizzard has screwed up in a handful of ways prior to Warcraft 3 Reforged. No one will ever forget the launch of Diablo 3 and the infamous Error 37 message. But Reforged was the starting point where it seemed as if the company was actively trying to burn all of its goodwill with its fans. Not only was Reforged allegedly falsely advertising new cutscenes like the ones shown at preview events and failed to implement advertised features, it also enforced an exploitative end-user license agreement that deemed any and all mods made from Reforged to immediately become property of Blizzard Entertainment. All of this led to a mass review bombing of the game on Metacritic, landing Reforged the dishonor of being the lowest user-rated game at the time. Blizzard would eventually outdo themselves in 2022 when Diablo Immortal was review bombed even more than Reforged and received an even lower user rating. Number 12. Contra Rogue Core. Konami knows it can publish great titles, but in the late 2010s, they were floundering hard. We'll get to one of their major flops in a minute, but Contra Rogue Core was a total misfire in the most embarrassing way possible. Look, we'll admit that the weapon upgrades and customization were cool, but everything else about this game felt like a desperate plea to get internet meme lords to buy in and buy in hard. Why else would we get a weaponized cyborg panda and graphics that look like they were ripped from a cancelled piss filter era game? This was simply not Contra at all, and longtime fans quickly rejected Rogue Core as they should have. Number 11. Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League.
Crackjack shot!
Here's the thing about Suicide Squad, right? The gameplay is fine. It's fun to move around and blast enemies like an overpowered freak. but there are so many confusing layers behind the curtain that it winds up making the game look worse. Why are there 7 different currencies? Why can you not properly upgrade weapons outside of a couple of stat bonuses? Why does every main mission impose an annoying stipulation like enemies only take damage from damage boosters? Why does the endgame content offer nothing interesting outside of the same exact missions over and over again? These enigmatic decisions ultimately make Suicide Squad seem like a rushed job, which makes it crystal clear how the game caused Warner Brothers to lose $200 million in revenue.
Jeez, LexCorp really did a number on you, huh, Red?
Number 10, Metal Gear Survive. Back to Konami one last time. Metal Gear has always been centered on military espionage, secretive warfare technology, and topics relating to various subjects touched upon during the Cold War. Metal Gear Survive does none of that and instead wants you and your friends to fight crystal-headed zombies for some reason. Because, you know, this has always been what Metal Gear is about, right? Oh, and if you wanted to restart your character from scratch for whatever reason, well, you better fork over more cash to purchase a new save file. Yeah, there's no reason for anyone to play this game at all. Number 9, The Quiet Man. Look, we're all for games offering new perspectives from people with different mental or physical conditions, but The Quiet Man is not this riveting piece of art it pretends to be. The story is a confounding mess of characters speaking in riddles with no real rhyme or reason behind their intentions. As for the gameplay itself, there's very little of it. Most of your time will be spent watching FMV cutscenes with combat scenarios sprinkled here and there. And even when you unlock the normal audio, nothing about the game makes sense in its story and structure. So what exactly is the point in playing this?
Why are you doing this? Leave him alone!
No, this has to happen, Lorraine. It's time.
Number 8, WWE 2K20.
Carmella just barely got out of the way. Ouch!
While the WWE 2K series managed to bounce back with 2K22, things looked heavily grim for the series when 2K20 launched. Never before had we seen such a poorly cobbled together mess of physics, character models, and technical performance. The game launched in such a horrid state that the entire internet was laughing at 2K for a solid few months before the company came out and said the series was skipping a year. This was done to give developer Visual Concepts some time to iron out their ideas and figure out where they wanted to take the franchise since the previous developer Yuke's was no longer in the picture. And now, look at where the series is, back and better than ever.
Women's Evolution.
Number 7, Babylon's Fall.
Welcome to Babylon.
Platinum Games was already struggling to make ends meet by the time they developed Babylon's Fall with Square Enix as their publisher. Unbeknownst to anyone, this would be their most humiliating release yet. Not only was this yet another live service to further saturate the market, it was built off of borrowed assets from Final Fantasy XIV that were implemented in cheap, lazy ways. Once you see the first set of corridors, it doesn't get any different from there. Babylon's Fall sold so poorly that when Square Enix announced the game was shutting down, retail stores began throwing away any and all copies from their store shelves. The game was on sale for less than a year.
Right you are. Used a Dynamis to do it, too.
Oh, most interesting.
Number 6, Fast and Furious Crossroads.
Yeah, I said the exact same thing.
So what now?
One of their trucks is in the police impound, apparently. If they're running supplies, then whatever's inside.
With Burnout being gone and Need for Speed missing the mark with every release, perhaps there was room for Fast and Furious to dominate the video game scene just as it claimed its own corner in the film industry. But guys, Crossroads was not the answer. The biggest crime this game committed wasn't the abysmal storytelling or the cringy voice acting. It wasn't even the awful controls. No, the worst part about this game is just how truly catastrophic the AI's condition was. Around every corner, you'd see cars crashing into each other outside of races as you drive to your next objective. We won't lie, it was pretty hilarious to witness. Fast and Furious Crossroads was delisted from all digital storefronts less than 2 years after release.
As much as I hate to agree with Cam, I think we can pull this off.
Well, I don't.
Number 5. Skull Island: Rise of Kong. Since its early days of publishing games like Big Rigs over-the-road racing, Game Mill Entertainment has struggled in maintaining a reputable image in the world of gaming. Alas, when it continues publishing games like Skull Island: Rise of Kong, one has to wonder what's going on. Rise of Kong was truly among the worst games we saw in 2023 with its piss-poor combat, uninspiring environments, and dreadful character animation. Even with its $30 price tag, nothing about this abomination told audiences you need to play this game unless you were a YouTuber or streamer dunking on the game. And yet, that's still not the worst we saw in 2023. Number 4. Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 5. Out of all the games that came out in the 2010s, nothing was more appalling than Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 5. Developed solely for Activision to squeeze as much money out of the license as possible before its expiration, Pro Skater 5 almost killed any and all interest in the franchise. In addition to a weak roster of skaters, parks, and customization options, the game was unbearably buggy in its physics, animations, and general stability. What was more confusing was just how much storage space it took up on your hardware, only for most of that storage space to be dedicated to the game's audio. Developer Robomoto closed its doors almost a year after the game's release, while Activision would eventually allow Vicarious Visions to remake the first 2 games in 2020. Number 3. Lord of Ring Gollum. Whoops, hang on folks. Number 3. The Lord of the Rings Gollum.
3 ways to silence them. Fear, 1 way. 2, a knife. Cut out a tongue. Very effective.
Please, it wasn't us.
I guess there was something wrong with ChatGPT on our end, but no worries, we got the title fixed. After all, it was the only thing about Gollum that could ever be fixed, as the game launched in a disgustingly unstable state in May 2023. Prior to release, Gollum did have a setting to turn on hair physics until Daedalic Entertainment notified the press, ourselves included, that the setting had to be removed due to it causing frequent crashes. And that's not all. Even today, many game-breaking bugs are still present, ranging from enemies forgetting to be hostile, collision detection failing to prevent the player from going out of bounds to see dev assets in the distance, and even without hair physics, constant crashing. We did name this the worst game of 2023, but then our next entry showed its ugly mug at the tail end of the year.
Where does the sun go up?
East. In the east.
No, that's not how it goes.
Number 2. The Day Before. Call it a scam, call it a sham, call it whatever insult you want to call it. There has never been a bigger case of suspicion and potential fraud quite like what we saw with The Day Before. This was an online multiplayer survival game that found itself in hot water with almost everyone in the gaming community, players and press. Take your pick for what you believe was the primary reason. Accusations of plagiarism in marketing, failing to pay contractors for their work, the abysmal technical state of the game, the questionable use of AI in its marketing, voice acting, and asset development. It's one massive package of problems that made so little money that developer Fantastic closed its doors 2 days after launch. The company tried to bounce back in 2024 by announcing a Kickstarter for a game, only for that whole thing to fail as well. The Day Before was such a monumental disaster that no one will ever trust Fantastic nor publisher Mytona again. And yet, that's not even the worst game we've seen over the last decade.
Before we continue, be sure to subscribe to our channel and ring the bell to get notified about our latest videos. You have the option to be notified for occasional videos or all of them. If you're on your phone, make sure to go into your settings and switch on notifications.
Number 1. Concord.
Rival crews after us. Focus on the zone. We're capturing the signal zone.
The thing about the day before was that it was a somewhat more isolated issue, as Fantastic and Mytona were new players that crashed and burned hard. Concord, on the other hand, was a game backed by Sony and was championed internally enough for the company to acquire developer Firewalk Studios before the game was even done. And they were so confident in this project that Sony dumped $400 million into this endeavor. $200 million for development and another $200 million for acquisition. What no one at Sony seemed to have understood was just how lackluster Concord was entirely. There was no unique game mode to differentiate itself from the market, no compelling characters to get behind, no campaign to wrangle in single-player gamers, no definitive plan to keep players coming back aside from new cutscenes, nothing. And so it bombed. Hard. Concord flopped so horribly that Sony removed the game from sale immediately, merely 11 days after launch, and closed servers 2 days later. How mediocrity of this caliber costs so much money to burn away like this is beyond us. But maybe someday we'll get the full story as to what happened. Did you suffer through any of these games for yourself? Let us know down in the comments.
No one's talking to you, Vernon!
Did you enjoy this video? Check out these other clips from WatchMojo and be sure to subscribe and ring the bell to be notified about our latest videos.